Hawaii's relationship with Donald Trump has been interesting, starting with his birther conspiracy.
You are not allowed to be a president if you're not born in this country.
Then Hillary Clinton's huge victory in Hawaii, and the state's recent lawsuit blocking the president's travel ban.
The first ruling came yesterday in Hawaii.
What kind of impact could a Trump White House and a Republican-controlled Congress have on Hawaii? Congresswoman Colleen Hanabusa joins tonight's discussion. This live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Yunji Denise. When Donald Trump was sworn in as the 45th president of the United States, it was the first time since 1928 that a new Republican administration took over while the party also controlled the Senate and House of Representatives. President Trump has vowed to drain the swamp, his metaphor for getting rid of insiders and many of the federal programs they supported. He's already rolled back executive orders that President Barack Obama issued to protect the environment and workers. He's introduced a budget to Congress that will not only drastically cut back social services, but eliminate federal funding altogether in areas that affect the environment, medical research, and the arts. The House Republicans will reintroduce the American Health Care Act to replace Obamacare. Could that mean the exemption we currently have for Hawaii's prepaid health care program may not be extended? What impact could a Trump White House and a Republican-controlled Congress have on Hawaii? At this time, we would add that the president's proposed budget calls for defunding the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. CPB provides funding for public television stations across the country, including PBS Hawaii. Locally, CPB funds 15%, that's 15% of PBS Hawaii's operating budget. Tonight, to avoid any conflict of interest or distraction, we will not comment on the possible defunding of CPB or the impact on PBS Hawaii. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet us your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org. Now to our guest. Our entire congressional delegation was invited to tonight's Insights. Senator Hirono sent her regrets last month due to an off-island commitment. Last week, Senator Schatz and Congresswoman Gabbard advised us they could not join us tonight. We are very pleased to have Congresswoman Colleen Hanabusa with us. She was elected to the U.S. House in 2010 and served 2 terms. She was re-elected to the U.S. House in November of 2016, where she currently serves on numerous caucuses and committees. Recently, Congresswoman Hanabusa was unanimously selected by her peers to join the House leadership team. Jennifer Sabas is former chief of staff for the late Senator Daniel Inouye, serving on his Washington, D.C. staff from 1986 to his passing in 2012. She now serves as the director of the Daniel K. Inouye Institute Fund and heads up Kaimana Hila, a local consulting firm. Robert Gentry represents the Waikiki Health Center Board. He previously served as board president. Recently, Mr. Gentry and a Waikiki Health leadership team returned from Washington, D.C., where they attended a health center policy and issues forum. State Representative Chris Lee has chaired the House Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection for the last 5 years. He was raised in Kailua and represents the Kailua and Waimanalo areas on Oahu. Thank you all for being here tonight. We really appreciate you being here, and we want to start with you, Congresswoman. You've been there in times of Democrat control, and now in this current state. What is it like to be in Washington in this environment?
Well, you know, I was there when I was first elected is when the House lost its majority status. And I was also there when and of course we had President Obama, who was the ultimate stopgap for everything that was done. This time it's very different. But the one thing that I do tell people that getting reelected back into the seat is like repeating kindergarten, except I know who to play with in the sandbox. I know where not to play in the sandbox and where the good shovels are and, you know, what corners you don't go into for obvious reasons. So it's a very different type of situation. Washington is not anything like I think people expect or even think it would be. There is, people just don't know. And I think it's because of the fact that people don't know what the president's thinking, and we're not even sure what the Republican majorities in both the houses can do about a president who they just don't seem to be on the same page with. And it's just a matter of just going through it. You know, we were all prepared to get dirty lickings, as we would say in Hawaii, on the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, only to have it yanked at really the last minute because they, meaning the Republicans, didn't have the votes on their side. And it's so amazing because you think, well, the least you would do is know how many votes you have before you put something down and you make a major thing about it.
I think you make a good point. We don't know what the president is thinking day to day, but his budget definitely has given us some insight into his priorities. When you look at the funding cuts for something like healthcare, Robert, I want to bring you in on this. When
Sure.
you see that, what would something, if the president's budget were to pass as is, and we're looking at these social services and Medicare and Medicaid cuts, what would that mean day to day for a clinic like yours?
It would be devastating, Yunji. We have over 11,000 patients at Waikiki Health. And if this budget went through, and particularly the Medicaid portion was cut dramatically, we would actually probably have patients literally die because we are the only medical service for many of these folks, other than the emergency room. And it would be devastating. Social services the same way. We help with job development and all kinds of things to get people back on track, and it would be just tremendous. Hopefully that's not going to happen. We all sit with our fingers crossed because, as the Congress member said, we don't know. This is a whole new, interesting era, and I really use the term interesting because I find it that way. I'm beyond now fear. I'm beyond whatever anger. It's interesting.
Wow. Well, Representative Lee, when you hear that this is, for the Waikiki Health Center, potentially a matter of life and death, how does the state then respond to what could be potential cuts in the millions of dollars?
No, it is really, I think, one of the real risks that we face right now. I think what a lot of people don't know is that the state budget already being tight does rely on a huge portion of federal money to supplement state services, whether it is social services and healthcare, or for example, the Department of Land and Natural Resources gets about 10% of its budget, about $13 million from federal funds. And if were that to go away, we would suddenly have massive gaps that would have to be filled. I think one of the things that we're starting to hear much more frequently from folks in the community is tangibly, what are they going to lose? People are starting to realize that they depend on some particular service or healthcare program, or their jobs and their businesses rely on some sort of support from the state and by extension the federal government. And now I think that reality is starting to register with people. And that's something I think that we're going to have to look at in this budget. And I think some of the legislators we work with, Sylvia Luke and Jill Takuda, who really focus on the budget side of things, are grappling with that very question right now.
I mean, certainly the state does not have the money that the feds do. We have a rainy day fund, but that could only last for so long.
That's right. I think there is precedent for some of the cuts that might be on the table should federal funding disappear. Back in 2009, 2010, at the height of the recession, the state cut billions of dollars out of its budget. But what we saw, I think, was not an ideal situation. I think we heard at that time from the public that this is untenable. And the money that we put into public services and government services and our economy has to be there. I mean, we ended up with furlough Fridays. We ended up with cuts that completely wiped out entire departments that people depend on. Vector control, Department of Health, that deals with rats and disease and all kinds of other stuff, was completely decimated. And we're still recovering from that today. So I think that's something that people are starting to really realize, that this is real.
Well, Jennifer, when you hear that, you were in Washington for quite a long time, having the knowledge of, having seen sort of different iterations of these fights over the years, is now the time to panic?
No, I don't think so. In preparing for this, so when I first started working, which is quite a long time ago for the senator, it was during the Reagan years. And that's probably the closest I think that we as Democrats came to having, lost control. And back then, and even now, with different White Houses, you really just have to be focused. You have to be focused. I think what makes this time very different is the fact that we have a White House that he's not used to being in government, and he's not, right, he's getting his feet on the ground, and things are changing, you know, and his own party is having a hard time reacting. And so, you know, the reference to the skinny budget, right, that the Congress has, it's really skinny, you know, but it's the beginning of a process, you know, so it'll be interesting to see what that full budget looks like, you know, and if there are as draconian cuts as everybody's worried about, then I think, you know, our delegation for sure, in concert with the legislature, is going to just have to be incredibly focused. Right? You can't win all battles.
When we think about being focused, how does one do that? Is there a particular area that you think Hawaii needs to fight for, or for our congressional delegation to fight for, versus another when you're looking at the budget, for instance?
You know, one of the interesting things is that we don't understand, I think a lot of us do not understand how things are so intertwined. Like, for example, even if we talk about, we not only have the skinny budget, but we also have the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, right? And what we don't seem to recognize is that the major component of the repeal of the Affordable Care Act is the impact on Medicaid. Medicaid for Hawaii is amazing because we have 100% coverage, for example, of all children between the prepaid health, between that plus S-CHIP, what we call S-CHIP, plus Medicaid. We have them 100% covered. You lose that, and you have all these people covered in the process. And you mentioned it in the beginning statements, and it's something that I'm still grappling with, is what is the impact on prepaid health, which I think has been, with all due respect, and I've said this before, with all due respect for the Obamacare and so forth, no one touches what the state of Hawaii has in terms of our prepaid health. That is to me, and should have been, the way we went as a nation. And as you know, that was actually Hillary Care in a way, and it didn't pass. But we have the Affordable Care Act. Now, Affordable Care Act has within its contents the prepaid health. So the question is, and you alluded to it, what happens if they repeal? And what can they repeal? So it's a whole procedural issue, because what we're dealing with is what is called a reconciliation process, which means they can't just repeal everything. They need 60 votes. Just like Congress needed in 2010 60 votes to pass, they need 60, and they don't have that. The Republicans don't have that. So it's going to be a more deliberate situation. Reconciliation, however, allows you to interface and to do things with taxes, debt, for example, and revenue. So those are the things that it can do, and the cuts in the budget. Those are the things. So unless it's in one of those categories, it shouldn't be touched. The unfortunate part is, who's the arbiter of that? The Republicans, because they control the agenda and they control what they think is how we're going to proceed. So we are in a difficult situation, and Hawaii has to, I think, step back and recognize the types of social services that are being affected. Mm-hmm. Like the total cut, 0 to CDBG, is really resulting with no Meals on Wheels. Or there is a lesser known program called CSBG. People get them confused. CSBG means no MEO on Maui, 0. It's zeroed out. No Hawaii Economic Opportunity Council on the Big Island, and Kauai as well. And on Oahu, it's HCAP. So what happens to all that? Who makes that up? With all due respect to the legislature, it's too much of a gap. We're not going to be able to make it up, because even if you cut, because they already have a reduction in their Council of Revenue projections, where are you going to find this money? This is going to be devastating. The only thing, if we can say, is that they haven't been able to repeal and replace yet, and hopefully they're not going to be able to, because we have extremes on both sides that have views on how it's going to end. And I've always told people, you have to eliminate that, and you almost have to work on the center and hope that the center comes together. That's what's going to save us, if there's any solution. It's going to be, we have to almost hope that the Tuesday group and the Republicans override the Freedom Caucus. But you know, it's things like that. And if we're going to do, but for Hawaii, also remember, we are going to be the beneficiary as well, because the cuts in the skinny budget are because there's an up in defense. 54 billion up in defense. So that means it's got to cut everything else, 54 billion. So we don't necessarily want to see that, but notwithstanding, Hawaii obviously is going to be a beneficiary of that. And you know, the budget is a document, and it gets really technical, but the budget isn't really what determines how much money we have. The budget is a policy statement that only the House of Representatives and the quote unquote the Senate agree to. So this is what the president wants. But the budget is still something that the two houses have to do. It's like the state. The governor sends down his quote unquote budget, but what passes is not his budget. It's what the House sends over to the Senate sends back, they conference, that's what it is. So it's almost equivalent to what Trump has done, is like the governor's quote budget, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna buy. Matter of fact, you probably can put your money on that they won't buy. And it's that kind of situation. So what we have to watch is what the two houses do. My money is they won't pass a budget because we haven't for a very long time. But the other thing though is what do they do with authorization acts and appropriations. Appropriations is what you have to watch, because that says how we spend the money.
Even though I would take your bet, I think that you probably are right. I don't know that that necessarily makes anyone at this table sleep at night, given that, you know, Robert's talking about a life and death situation, and Representative Lee is saying that the cuts could be so astronomical that the state could not shoulder them. I wonder if the legislature is doing anything to sort of maybe a preemptive strike, so to speak. I mean, is there anything that you can do to kind of dull the blow of something like this?
I think after the last recession, I mean, thanks to the responsible leadership of the folks who've been there for some time, who've been working on this stuff, they started putting money away into rainy day funds and into other places so that we're at least somewhat buoyed against cuts that could come down. But it only lasts so long before you really have to start picking and choosing between priorities and triaging what's there that the community really needs. So in the long term, I mean, there is, I think, a real discussion that has to be had over really what is the purpose of government, not what is the arbitrary level of money we have available today, but what is the purpose of government? What services do people expect of our state and other levels of government? And then how do we actually provide that in an efficient and effective way? I think that's part of the discussion that I think is lost behind just the numbers and the sheer cuts and other budget line items that are out there. So that's, I think, the discussion that we're hoping to have and launch into. You know, what is important to people? What is it you want to see? And what is it we need to start to protect?
Yunji, I come at this from a local government perspective too. I served as mayor of my community in California for many years, and I understand these differences in people. But at Waikiki Health, we are a fairly small nonprofit. 15 million is our budget. And we've taken on kind of a whole new approach because of all of this stuff that's going on. And our new approach is we understand that decisions are made because of relationships everywhere in life. So we're starting a new effort to build our relationships in Washington and in the legislature as best we can, one-on-one, slowly, and we're dealing with the term political in a positive way, not in a negative way, because we feel that we can have a difference. And each one of us has to feel like we can make a difference, and we can if we articulate our needs and our desires and our positions well, and we build those relationships beyond the labels that people give us and that we give each other. So we're going to do that full bore for a while, and hopefully we'll make a little bit of difference in our own particular
Well,
lives.
$15 million certainly doesn't pay for much of a lobbyist, does it, on that kind of a budget? So you're doing all of those relationships yourself.
We are, exactly. We're going to do them ourselves.
You know, the advantage that places like Waikiki has is, believe it or not, even among the Republicans, community health centers are something that they believe in. Because I tell people, when you look at where the, quote, the parties are, the East Coast, the West Coast, and Hawaii, I tell people, forget it. I mean, we're solid Democrats, but it's Middle America that is really setting the tone, and it's Middle America that actually elected Donald Trump. So one of the things that they are sensitive to is community health centers, because that's what keeps people in the rural areas, like in Hawaii. It's all the neighbor islands community health centers. Hawai'i Coast Comprehensive, for example, for where I grew up. So these are the kinds of, so they have, in all due respect, they kind of have something that they can work towards. And something that both Jennifer and I have worked on for a long time, and you see the impact of what relationships are and how relationships can do a difference. And when you lose those relationships, it makes a difference, is East-West Center. And it was something that the House always used to bargain against Senator Inouye, so they zeroed them out. But there's no senator to bargain against anymore. So the question is, what happens to institutions or programs like that? That's right now, for the way the world is going, we need that kind of diplomacy base and really something other than an emphasis on military. We need that other up that I call the other leg of the three-legged stool.
The diplomacy side.
Exactly, and Jennifer knows the history. East-West Center every time. And it was a matter of getting to the point of saying to the East-West Center, you can't depend on the senator coming in every year and putting in your 20-something $million. They're cut now. But those and then you look at the cut, the skinny budget cut to State Department, guess what's probably zeroed out when that main one comes out? It's going to be entities like that. So there are differences in terms of what you can hopefully see revived and what you can probably lay your money on that will have a very difficult time.
Well, right now the East-West Center is at zero in this current budget.
That's right.
For sure.
Right.
We want to bring in our viewers now, and please do tweet us and call with your questions. Gary from Nu'uanu has a question for the Congresswoman. This administration is giving us a good opportunity to look at social service programs by reviewing the budgets and figuring out ways to cut waste. Do you think that's true?
The one thing that people do not understand is that even with the Budget Control Act of 2011, which is where the interesting word sequestration came from, there are certain parts of, he seems to be talking about social services like, for example, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, veterans, for example. Those are items that are mandatory spendings within the, quote, the structure of the budget. So that's not stuff that Congress actually affects. So when we talk about how to cut and in the sequestration, and it's really not those those programs. And people always have this opinion that unless you get to those mandatory programs, you can't affect the quote unquote the budget of the United States because it's 50% plus. Discretionary budget is about 50%, of which 50% is military. So you can imagine that's the impact. So when we see what President Trump has come down with his skinny budget, 50% goes up $54 billion. The other 50% is going down $54 billion because we still have a law that requires us to balance out. So yes, I mean, I understand what he's saying, but there are certain things that even the president can't touch. And Social Security is one of those. Mm-hmm. Medicare and Medicaid are being affected by the Affordable Care Act because that's an incorporation in that statute.
I think there's another side to this coin too as well that needs to be seriously considered, which is not just looking at the amount of funding available today that's funding programs and services, but really what is it that's going to come or could come in the future that we need to rely upon. And I think it's not just direct dollars into Hawaii from the federal government, but different kinds of support from other agencies. We have an aging population. We have other issues that require attention on a much bigger level. And I think where we had some success with the Obama administration focusing on some of these things, on climate, for example, we may not see that level of support or funding in the same way in the future. I mean, we are obviously one of the states most affected. If we have a direct hurricane hit in Waikiki or in Honolulu, for example, we're looking at a $40 billion loss to our economy. If Waikiki Beach erodes, that's a $2 billion annual loss. And so I think these things are real, and the federal support necessary moving forward to deal with some of these and plan appropriately, both with respect to putting in the right kind of infrastructure to deal with this, as well as the right kind of technical support and other assistance is going to be critical in the years to come. And if that gets choked off, we really will have to rely upon ourselves and really step up our game here locally.
Jennifer, I want to bring you in on this question. This comes from Patty, and she wants to know what's the position of our state and why don't we have a strong two-party system representing us in Washington? I think given that you have negotiated there for so long, you might be able to tackle this one.
Well, I mean, I think it's, for here, it is the will of the people, and the need, for a strong, vibrant Republican Party. I think it's their ability to message. So I think it's their ability to be able to message, and be able to, garner the candidates. I do think with our delegation in Washington, it's also being able, as Colleen talked about, to understand a bit more about where the national voters were, and why, right, and why our, choice for president was not successful. But I think as we go forward, it really is going to take all parties to figure out where we go.
My Republican friends here in Waikiki tell me that part of the problem here is the power of the union, and that historically the workers, the middle-class workers in Hawaii, all been unionized, and the Democratic Party in the history of the state got them on their side. And, if that's the case, that's the case. The question is excellent, and it's one that I am concerned about, because if you have a one-party state, there's going to be fractions anyway. And it's going to split up, and it's going to even be uglier, I think, than with a strong two-party system where each party has their principles, their platform, their leadership, and their programs.
You better be careful. You are surrounded by some pretty strong Democrats here tonight. But
And I respect them a lot.
No, I think there is a fairness to the question, though. Are we too blue for our own good? Does that ultimately hurt us on the national level?
I don't think it hurts us in terms of, because you got to remember one thing, it is the will of the people. And I do understand the concept of when people say the unions are too strong. But remember, it's really the Rust Belt that turned against Democrats in this last election.
That's true.
And that's why Trump won. It was because some people say that the Clinton campaign took for granted Michigan, for example, or Pennsylvania. All you needed was one of those states. That's it. It would have made a difference. But it's the Rust Belt. So what was it that people were listening to? I think bottom line that we all, as all of us who are elected officials, have got to recognize is the message of jobs, the message of the economy was great, to the point that President Obama's, and though Hillary changed her position, President Obama's position on trade and Bill Clinton's NAFTA, those were like mantras against Democrats for the purpose, I think, of the working class and those who are in union. How could you lose those states if the unions controlled? I think even locally, you find that there is a difference. That it's not like they march to whatever their union leaders say that they should do. The union leaders are elected as well. They have to be cognizant of what their rank and file are saying. I think Chris can probably best address this. My understanding is the unions aren't necessarily endorsing only Democrats or saying that this is the way it's going to be. They have broken ranks, and they have caused some consternation, some unions have, with the majorities in the respective houses. But before I went to Washington, I was Senate president, and I told people, my Republican colleagues, because I had two at that time, I said, you're not doing us any favors. We need the discussion. But you've got to go out there and convince the people that you represent what they want to hear. You can't have a situation like in the House, 51, Senate 25-0, House 51, and it's going to be 5.
Right.
They lost 2 rising stars. Aaron Johansson last year and Beth Fukumoto Chang this year. What's going on?
Right, and that was a topic for an Insights not too long ago. What do you make of that? Are we too blue for our own good?
No, I think I'd agree with the Congresswoman. I think here in Hawaii, we are certainly, by the numbers, overwhelmingly Democratic. But the truth is, you have this wide spectrum of political affiliation with really, really conservative Democrats, far more conservative than some Republicans, and Republicans that are very liberal, far more so than some Democrats. And you do have a certain amount of discussion. But I think the message that Republicans locally have been leading with and talking about at their conventions and other things that we've seen do not reflect in many ways the values that the people of Hawaii want, of inclusion, of tolerance, of you're never going to have someone elected here who says, climate change is not affecting Hawaii at all and is not a threat or a risk and is not happening and all those hurricanes are just by chance. There are real things here that I think resonate with people that do not reflect the national Republican Party. And unless the Republican Party here can really embrace what's important to local people, I think they're going to continue to see a very small minority status in the state.
I think there are probably a lot of Democrats, though, in this state, voters who feel like they don't necessarily have a voice, not, in Washington in the same way, perhaps, that you would if you had Republican representation. And to that end, Jennifer, maybe I can bring you in on this. What can a person do on a practical level if you want to see the Waikiki Health Center continue to get funding, or the East-West Center, or social services that are so important to so many in our state? Obviously, calling the Congresswoman is a wasted phone call because she's already on the case. What do you do on a practical level?
I do think it is working with our delegation because they are our representatives, and they, in their way, also, look for alliances. Because I think, what Chris said is exactly correct, and Colleen, you got to play to the middle, and so for those initiatives that are important, right, our members, we need to rely on our members to be able to reach across the aisle and find those alliances. I mean, clearly they're easier in areas that are defense related, or but there are opportunities, I think to reach out, because it is very difficult. There are alliances with the health center, and they have national networks, and you can work with those organizations and have them rely more on their Republican counterparts within a national organization. But otherwise, I think we have to work together and rely on our delegation to help reach across the aisle.
We've got another one. I think this person wants to make sure that everyone feels the pain equally. Sean in Kaneohe wants to know if the federal or state budgets are cut, how will it affect the salaries and benefits of the congressional delegates and state representatives? I'll let you take that first.
I don't think we've had that discussion before, because remember in 2013 we actually did shut down the government, and I used to say up to the point that as different as we may be, the one thing we never did was shut down government. And in 2013, I had to eat my words. So what the different congressional delegates did was they handled it differently. Some of us, just for the period of time that we were shut down, we donated our pay to whomever, and people did it all differently. Some people wrote a check directly to the government. I wrote it to various agencies that were being hurt. Meals on Wheels and different things that I felt, okay, this needs the money. So, but also remember that when we shut down the federal government, the first resolution that is passed is the one that says those who are not working are going to get paid. So that's what made the whole shutdown rather crazy, because it was like paid vacation. Right. So there were those who worked, like we made sure shipyard worked, so shipyard people got paid, but they were working. And everyone else that was on this mandatory leave, when they came back, they got paid. And that's not just a Democrat thing, because we couldn't pass that. It's both sides realizing that the federal workforce was very important and they needed to do it. So in a way, yes. I mean, if we start to cut, it depends, like if it's a radical cut like what the shutting down of government was, first legislation out was to make sure everybody got paid.
Anonymous in Kaneohe says, some of the smartest and richest people in the country live here part-time or visit here frequently. Have they been approached to see if they will help find solutions to Hawaii state budget problems? Chris Lee, what do you think about that?
There are some really solid brains here in the state, both local and other folks who I think fit that profile. You have people like Piero Midyar, who's got a huge philanthropic drive and has put money into Civil Beat to hold government leaders here accountable and provide transparency into government operations, who funds all kinds of other things as well. The Ulupono Initiative that does a lot of work. But I think the bottom line is we want to hear from everybody in the state, right? We don't want to just convene like 2 or 3 people and see if we can figure this out, because I think, as I mentioned before, it really does come down to what are the priorities people want to see? You know, what is it you want? That's the bottom line, and that's where we need to hear from everybody. And I do hope that if there's money put into anything, it is additional outreach to help people engage in that process and vote, to say nothing of actually coming in and participating and lobbying or testifying or advocating for funding or support for some issue that's important to them.
Are you finding more engagement on your side, or are more people calling your office?
You know, yes, and I think there's a good show of this. Every year I go to the University of Hawaii and in concert with one of the local unions, just do a real brief, like, organizing 101. It's really dry and boring on a whiteboard. You know, here's how you get involved in the process. And usually there's about 15 or 20 kids that show up. This past year, after the election, we walked up and there was a room full of 150 people. It was standing room only. And this, I think, is the silver lining in all of this. Mm-hmm. It is engaging people now in a way that we haven't seen, at least I haven't seen, in a very long time. And I think that's a great thing.
But I think it's also turning the anger, right? I mean, people were angry after the election, and so how do you turn it to be productive? I mean, you know, I was in DC a couple of weeks ago, and they're still protesting, and you know, like, how do you get that energy and make it positive?
They're
solution oriented.
There's an organization who comes every Tuesday. They're a combination of Indivisible, J20 Plus, and they make it a point to visit all the congressional offices Tuesday at 11:30, and it is for us to listen to them. And they don't say they're Republican or Democrat. They are issue driven, and they're keeping us accountable. And they wanna know. They have questions, and they want answers to those questions. Like Chris said, I think this is a function of the election. And I think this was also a function of the march, the Women's March. Remember, that happened after President Trump was inaugurated. And I keep telling people, everyone should remember, it started in Hawaii. There was a group of women, about 3 or 4 of them, either Hana, Molokai, but in Maui, it's how it started. It went viral, and it got picked up. But you know, it's a phenomenal thing. So I think what people have to realize is that Hawaii has a very strong history of activism. And maybe we were too comfortable for a while, but believe me, I think the people, we call it an organic movement. The organic movement is picking up, and that's what's going to make a difference.
Will the organic movement, though, be enough to stop the budget cuts that we're talking about?
It could
tonight?
be. It could be, and that's why I referred earlier to the fact that this time in our life is so interesting. Mm-hmm. And I find it absolutely fascinating, because I think this whole situation currently is probably the most educational experience that Americans have had in decades. Mm-hmm. Because of the election, the campaign, how everything went on both sides, how it's occurred afterwards, how our president has changed rather dramatically in the last few days. People are all over the country are kind of going, what's going on? It's fascinating. So people are talking about it. Mm-hmm. Our youth are much more involved than they ever have been before. And to me, that's very, very exciting.
I think it really is. This country went from West Wing to House of Cards in November, and the question is, how do we get back, at least to Veep or something else, middle ground? But I think there's a lot of ways you can get involved, and we're seeing people now getting. You don't just have to run for office or just have to testify on a bill or call your elected official. There's a lot of ways to get involved and make a difference, because this isn't a debate that's going to be decided this year. You know, it's a question of priorities for this country and our direction for decades and for generations to come. And I think one of the great things is, and not to say the federal government isn't important, everybody pays attention to the federal government, but there's a lot going on here too. And I'd say of your daily life, like 90% of the things that you really care about, that you notice tangibly, happen and are decided on the local level. When you get up in the morning and drive down the street, are you going to have potholes in that street? What kind of education is your kid going to get? What kind of school are they going to go to? All of these things people can change in a real way if they just get involved, and that could be participating at a local nonprofit or health center, could be getting involved in an environmental group or what have you. But there's a lot of opportunity for that, and I think these groups are really seeing a lot of interest that they haven't before. And that helps all of us, I think, be better advocates on the government side.
We are certainly seeing a lot more engagement. I also wanted to touch on something that you brought up earlier, and that was the increase in defense. What could that mean on a practical level for Hawaii? How much could we stand to benefit?
You know, the position, even with President Obama, remember when he said he's pivoting to Asia Pacific, and Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, said, and let's not forget, Hawaii is the gateway to Asia Pacific. So what it means in terms of defense right now is if you listen to the defense, debates that are going on in Washington, they are, in my opinion, being focused a lot on what they call the triad. And the triad is nuclear defense. And it is a matter of, okay, how do we build? So the way Hawaii is going to benefit is the fact that the one thing, and Senator Inouye used to tell me this all the time, he would say, Colleen, after World War II, the United States ruled the 7 Cs. And I remember 7 Cs. That's not something people talked about. He says, if we have 20%, we're lucky. He says, but always remember, we will rule the deep blue sea, and don't ever forget that. That's what you've got, that's what you're there to protect. He's talking about subs.
Yep.
Subs. So right now, with the quote, the budget, the increases, and Secretary Mabus, who was the Secretary of the Navy under Obama, came up with a 355 vessel or ship fleet. 355. 66 of that are Virginia-class subs. And that is Pearl Harbor. So a lot of it is that's how we are going to benefit, is that we are the most forward presence. There is no question in anyone's mind. The threats to the United States are in the following order: Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. That's it. Where are they? I mean, Iran is still sort of in the middle. I mean, it's in the Middle East, but it has impact. Everyone else is in the Pacific. So what is the most forward position that we have? And it is Hawaii. So as long as we are going to take the defensive posture, and I'm not saying that the president's increase is correct or anything along those lines. This is in response to how would we benefit. As long as the powers to be make that decision, Hawaii is the natural place and home. We are, thanks to really Senator, and when he decided the PACOM headquarters will be here, Fort Shafter has it all, we are the home of the Pacific Command. Pacific Command has 55% of the Earth's surface. That's their AOR, area of responsibility. It's Hawaii. It's going to be Hawaii. So that is where we stand to benefit. We will have the workforce. We always go out and ensure Pearl Harbor's workforce is fine. A lot of private-public partnerships are trying to develop to take care of other surface ships. Because when we dispatch, for example, the Carl Vinson as we have to North Korea, and that's a totally different story, but as we do that, when you look at that picture, it is not just a carrier. It is a carrier and its entourage, as I call it, and it's a huge fleet. They've got to all be fixed somewhere, repaired somewhere, and they've all got to be home ported somewhere. And believe me, we may not be able to home port a carrier because of just geographic limitations, but that doesn't mean we don't home port a lot of the other ancillary vessels associated.
Does that kind of defense spending bring any comfort to the state legislature?
Oh, sure. You know, I think the more that we can support our armed services, who in turn support our local economy and our community. We have a lot of federal contractors and folks who work at the shipyards. My grandfather actually worked at Pearl Harbor for decades, from Pearl Harbor back in '41 on. And there's a legacy there, I think, that is still incredibly strong. Mm-hmm. When you think about not only the DoD side of it, but the investments we make in our commercial fleets that also have a presence here in Hawaii. That is, I think, as the Congresswoman had alluded to, the other side of the stick. That is the carrot to the stick that we have, where we can provide foreign aid and provide transit and control commercial shipping lines and be able to have some sort of security interest in an economic sense that has a presence here in Hawaii. All of that is great. We've seen other countries like China in particular, which is putting literally billions of dollars into building out those industries right now to compete with us. And we are, I think, scrapping for somewhere below $90 million in the current federal budget to support the same things. We've really got to step it up. And if we can do that, Hawaii absolutely stands to benefit.
What kind of power do you think that gives us as a state, our geographical component, and given that we are the head of the Pacific Command?
Yeah, I mean, Colleen said it really well. I mean, we are forward deployed. Lots of investments that Senator Inoue and Senator Akaka made together. The shipyard, and so Colleen talked about the Virginia class. I mean, a lot of planning went into making sure that Pearl Harbor would be the home, right, for the Virginia class, and then tying in the University of Hawaii to make sure that we had a local workforce that was not flown in from the mainland, right? But every engineer who wanted to stay in Hawaii had an opportunity to work here. And I think the other big buzzword that's tied into all of this is cybersecurity. The Defense Department has increased and has made cyber a combatant command. What does that mean? As a fighting command, right? So that we are, as a nation, as vulnerable in that area as well. We are one of 5 centers, for the National Security Agency, which has responsibility there. I mean, so those are scary stuff. But the good thing is it ties to cyber, it ties to students, it ties to STEM, and it ties to an educated workforce. And I think that to me is an on-the-ground benefit. We will do our part as the 50th state in a forward deployed way. But I think what the senator had always wanted to make sure was that our local kids had the opportunity to have good jobs and to stay here. And being able to tie the two together, I think, is important.
Well, given how important defense is to this president, hopefully that puts us in some good graces. We have a question over Twitter. Trump seems like a quid pro quo guy. What retribution will Hawaii face for constantly being in opposition? This, of course, also referencing our lawsuit against the travel ban. Do you think that there is any personal aggression, vendetta toward our state, or are we just one of many?
I think that's something to watch. I mean, we are one of many. We're not the only one. State of Washington was the first, and it was probably disturbing to him because it was a Republican-appointed district court judge as opposed to ours who did that ban. I mean, who found the first ban unconstitutional. So when you think about it, it's going to be a matter of he has so many things that he has to think about. I'm not sure that he's going to have that level of retribution against Hawaii. And on top of that, he has a hotel structure, a condo hotel in his name, and those things seem to matter to him. So I don't think he's going to want to see any kind of failure associated with his name or his product.
Interesting insurance
I
there.
think what she's saying is she hasn't been retweeted yet. But I think it's important to note too that in some of the Midwestern states, the real deep red Trump-supporting bastions of conservatism that really believed in the president, they're suffering just as much, if not more, than we will, because the populations there depend on federal services, healthcare services, and all sorts of other stuff that's on the chopping block, just the same as every other state, including us, are facing. I think it's a real question of what is the ideology here? And when we think about whether we should face a risk, I think at the core of it, we shouldn't be afraid to hold leaders accountable. That is the bottom line. We should never be afraid to hold our leaders accountable, because the minute we do that is the minute we undermine our democracy. And for us here in Hawaii, there is definitely lessons learned, whether it's Japanese internment or any number of other things on healthcare, on women's rights, on the environment, that we have to protect. And that story has to be told. And if it means standing up to the president from time to time, I think that's our obligation as citizens of this country, first and foremost above anything else.
I see something else happening here too. I see Mr. Trump really changing in a way, and I see it every day. I also see the fact that he's in that presidency because of the fact that we had for 8 years the first African American president in the United States, and that upset a number of people. We didn't talk about it, they didn't talk about it, but it upset them. He plugged into that in very interesting ways during the campaign, and I think that made a very real difference in the outcome of this election. But that, plus the fact that he is now changing, says to me that there's a whole different thing going on here, and it's going to continue. And it's kind of like, stay tuned. Will he discipline Hawaii? I don't think so. I don't think he even understands. His whole experience has been other parts in the world, especially in the United States. It's not been in the Western United States. It's all been East and Florida and so forth. I just don't think he's going to think that way.
But I think, well, he's on a learning curve. Right?
Oh, boy.
Which is really kind of scary. But, you know, it's incrementally getting better, I would like to think.
Yeah.
You know, he's kind of distancing himself from Russia. You know, he's kind of recognizing the value of NATO. But I think in the learning curve, right, it gets kind of nerve-wracking. You know,
if you're in the crosshairs,
right.
Absolutely. I think
it's not time for OJT.
one thing, a couple of people have written in about rail, and should we be worried that monies for rail could be cut, and perhaps should we be using those monies for social services or other immediate needs? What is your read on rail? And I know rail is a whole separate show, but just in terms of pure funding.
You know, I think that it is unfortunate because rail right now, how we're gonna pay for it is really in the hands of the legislature. And the two versions that we see is, one is SKIM, which is about, in a perfect world situation, maybe about 300 million more over 10 years. The other is the House version, which is 2% plus the SKIM, which would give us about 1.23 billion more. I think what's going to happen is that it is not going to be adequate to the funding of rail. But if that's the legislature's position, remember, the rail is a city project. It is not a state project. What the legislature did, because I was there when we gave the initial quote, approval, and it goes to the city, and the city is the one who implements what we call the quote, the GET. It's not the state. The state authorizes because it is a state tax. It is not a city tax. So it's up to the city, and the city did. And the city also passed by referendum steel on steel, which is why we have what we have. The federal government, I think, is very clear, and Trump is also very clear, that any kind of major infrastructure has to be by public-private partnerships. It is not something that he's just going to turn over all this money. So for the position that the city and county of Honolulu is now, it has not received the total $1.55 billion, which is their share of the full funding grant agreement, which is the compact or the agreement between the state of Hawaii, well, the city and county of Honolulu and the federal government. But remember now, that amount was determined when the total cost of the construction was $4.9 billion, and the whole total amount would be $5.2. That's why people say, well, it's 30%. It's not going to be 30%. We're not even going to get everything. So I think that the problem is that, you know, they're going to have to make a decision as to how they proceed. When I say they, I'm talking about the city. I'm talking about HART, because if the legislature takes the position as they have now, which is their right to decide whether they're going to let their GET be extended or not, then it comes back to the entity that is responsible under the full funding grant agreement. It doesn't mean that they could not decide, they meaning the city could not decide to breach it. Then we take the consequences as to whether the FTA says, okay, you guys gave it a good show, so you get the $750 million, you keep it, but we're not going to give you any more money. Or they say, you breached this and we're going to come after you for the money.
Well, we only have about a minute left, and I know we could do a whole show on rail, but just final closing thoughts in terms of engagement. What do you want people to do? Call your office? Do they call Chris's office? Where do they go to express how they're feeling right now when they see these budget cuts on the line?
I think they should just engage. Whoever they feel comfortable with engaging with, they should engage. I think I agree. I think one of the most positive things that this has all come about with is the fact that we see this almost this rise in consciousness, and people, it's like the old movie Network, you know, I'm so mad I'm not going to take it anymore, or whatever it is. You know, it's that feeling, because it's with that feeling that we become better. Your elected officials become better because they know that they're watching and they're being held accountable. So I think I just want to see them engage. And if they call Chris, and Chris will say, go call Hanabusa. That's a federal issue. And if he calls me about potholes, I'm going to say, go call your mayor.
All right.
Potholes we don't do, you know?
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you to all of the viewers who participated in tonight's discussion. And for those of you who did call in about how PBS Hawaii might be impacted by the defunding of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, we didn't answer your questions tonight to avoid any conflict of interest. Please do call or write to PBS Hawaii, and we will gladly answer any questions we're able to at that time. We want to thank our guests tonight, Congresswoman Colleen Hanabusa, Robert Gentry from Waikiki Health Center, Jennifer Sabas for the Daniel K. Inouye Institute Fund, and State Representative Chris Lee. Next week on Insights, we'll hear from some of the union representatives currently negotiating new contracts with the state government. I'm Yanji Denise for Insights on PBS Hawaii, and until next time, a hui hou.